Today we have a very interesting show. You know, when you think of St. Valentine's Day, of course, you think of chocolate, chocolate, chocolate. And today we have the expert on chocolate, Victoria, the chocolate empress of Cocoa Bean, Boston Cocoa Bean Company. She knows all about it, and she'll tell us more. Now, she took a trip to Colombia to look at the big plantations and the small farms where they grow the beans. And she will tell us all about it and show us how the pods look and what they do to make the chocolate. So without any further ado, here is Victoria.
Thank you, Kitty. Yeah, as you said, we at Cocoa Beantown, my company, we do all sorts of different chocolate events, chocolate tastings, which you've been a part of.
I went to one that was fabulous.
I think you've been to more than one by now.
Yes.
Yeah, it's quite a few. And so chocolate tasting events, pairing events where we do chocolate and wine, chocolate and tea, chocolate and coffee, different chocolate and cheese even now.
And then you learn which chocolate you liked. I never knew about how different they can be.
Right, yeah, and through the tasting events and then also walking tours in different neighborhoods in Boston. We also started a tour this past year in Concord too, that's history and chocolate and chocolate educational events. And so to kind of add to the different things that we can offer folks in terms of being a resource for education and helping people learn more about chocolate, I got to go on this trip to Colombia.
Yes, that would be very interesting to see how these things come. They don't come out of the blue. This is quite a big process. We should appreciate every morsel when we see how difficult it is. First the fruit and then the process. It's not easy.
Right, and I think for me that was a big motivation to go on this trip. I was really fortunate to be invited by a chocolate maker friend that I'm going to talk about later and try some of her chocolates.
Yeah, she sounds fascinating.
Yeah, her name is Denise Castronovo, and she actually has a Massachusetts connection. She was born and raised in Walpole and lived in the Boston area into adulthood. And she, about a year ago, invited me on this trip to join her to visit Colombia, where we visited a number of cacao farms or cocoa farms and plantations. We also got to meet with farmers and talk to them.
And on the table you see the sacks that they put the pods in.
Right. I brought a number of things to kind of show different elements. They're not necessarily the things that you think of most readily when you think of chocolate, but these are all things that are part and parcel of the process. So when you're in a beautiful chocolate shop filled with truffles and bonbons and chocolate bars, all the things that are on the table here are things that come before it gets to that point.
I would never think how complicated this is.
Yeah, it's incredibly complicated, and a lot of folks don't realize it. And so it's really fun to get to educate them on that. And I think for me, having that knowledge was one thing, because I had always done lots of reading to prepare for the classes that we do, but actually getting the hands-on experience of going to the farms.
That's very different.
Yeah.
And seeing the trees and the people that work so hard on it would be really interesting.
Right, and I think the biggest thing for me getting to go to Colombia and, as I said, visit these farms and plantations, meet the farmers, also meet the people that work in what happens getting it off the farm and getting it to, we did visit a local chocolate factory in Colombia and get to see all these different aspects of the process firsthand, and now being able to speak about that authentically to folks in classes. I think brings a whole new level of understanding, not just for me, but also for the people that I get to, as you said, help them appreciate chocolate in a
Oh Lord.
Actually, they say now you shouldn't use a machete.
She said he doesn't cook at home.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So I can be your hand model? I would like.
Ooh.
Look at this fluff.
Yellow
This
Lord.
is my favorite.
Cool.
That's fluff.
Yeah, that's like.
because look at the edge on that. It has a little
So this is another
And a bigger grain.
variety. It's an ISH 565.
So this cacao just got put out for drying today.
Yeah, maybe we can. Let's go out to the light. Some more light.
I've never seen the first cut go correctly.
The varieties, right? So we have a blend here. I would start just by, you know, if it smells right, it's right, right? So I would like you to start by.
Difficult to tell when it's been shaved like this, but this you can see there's not really fissures running through it, so I would call that flat.
And that's under fermented.
It's under fermented. This one also, if you look and break it, there's a little bit of brown in it. Not as fissured. So that also could be considered flat or violet. Then the one that's like this, you can see it's a little brown. Wait, you made a zero from only Pedro's
Right. So as you mentioned, the nice little tablecloth, very rustic style tablecloth we have here, is actually a burlap sack used for transporting cocoa beans or cacao beans. And I actually have some here inside a hollowed out pod. So this is actually a real cacao pod that was dried and hollowed out. And in here are the beans, which look a lot like almonds, but they are, in fact, the beans that get processed.
These are already partly processed.
Yeah, so what happens that a lot of people don't realize, just the fact that it comes from a bean that's inside a pod, and it's a really kind of funny looking thing. This is a pod that's just been painted and varnished to preserve a different color. But they come in all different colors, and that was one of the photos I wanted to share with you. They come basically in a rainbow assortment.
Really?
There's
I didn't realize that.
red, yellow, green,
Really?
brown.
Does it affect the flavor?
It not necessarily, except for you to be able to know where they are in the
How
kind
ripe
of
they are,
maturation
yeah.
process. Yeah, but there are farmers that know their trees well enough to be able to look at the color of a pod and
they
kind
know.
of tell. So you have all these different colors, and the pods actually grow up and down the trunk of the tree, so that when you harvest them, they actually have to be harvested by hand. And I think that's the very first thing for anyone that's a serious chocoholic. If you really want to appreciate the craftsmanship that goes into fine quality chocolate, to understand that this is really hard labor.
I would imagine.
Yeah,
And it's hot there.
it's very hot. It's very humid. The trees are, very close together, so they actually insulate the humidity. If I could describe the sensation of what it feels like to step into a grove of cocoa trees or cacao trees, if anyone ever takes a really hot, steamy shower at home, and you keep that shower curtain sealed, and then
Wow.
once you
It's
shut
that
the
hot?
well, once you take the turn the water off, right, and then you pull the curtain back, you feel the humidity release. The inverse of that is what it feels like to walk into a grove of trees. So you just suddenly feel humidity surround you and kind of envelop you, and you have an understanding that the
guess
trees are.
That's what the trees need.
Yeah, they like it hot and humid, but they're also really very friendly trees in terms of the ecosystem and what they get along with. What was so interesting to me was to see how many other types of fruit, because it is a fruit actually, how many other types of fruit grow amongst the trees. So
That's interesting.
yeah, so we saw starfruit, mango, bananas, all these other types of fruit trees that are all peppered amongst the cacao trees. So you have this wonderful intermingling of flavors that's possible, which
And
is
that probably affects the flavor of the
yeah,
bean.
you're exactly right. What I was just about to say is that the second probably most prominent thing to understand about what goes into craft chocolate is that when you have nicely made chocolate, it's preserving all those flavors that are naturally in those beans, as opposed to, kind of a low-end commercial chocolate where they source beans and then kind of average out the flavors because they mix all the beans from all over. When you get a craft chocolate bar, you're going to have sometimes natural banana notes or starfruit notes or papaya notes all in there.
I think also coffee, no?
Coffee too, yeah. Certainly Colombia, I saw a lot of coffee. A lot of coffee grows in areas similar to where cocoa likes to grow as well. I think the other things that, and here's the picture of a pod growing from a tree. You can see
Yes,
right there.
interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know they were on the trunk.
Yes.
I thought, most...
It's strange. It's
Yes.
really bizarre. And they are funny looking, I have to say. But also, here's a tree that was right next to it.
A banana.
It's a
yeah.
banana tree.
So that bean will have a banana flavor.
Right. And so the thing that we started to realize as we're observing all these farms is that Colombia is first of all, it's a really exceptional country in terms of the diversity of plants and plant life that grows there. They have so many fruits that grow, and there's also just an amazing, the biodiversity. amongst many of the things that we saw in Colombia, we learned a lot about environmental impact of different kinds of crops. And Colombia is incredible in its diversity of plant life because it has the greatest variety of microbiomes of any country in the world. So at the same country, you have mountainous areas, you have low-lying areas, you have coastlines, you have more humid, less humid areas, all of this in one country. So the plants, the crops, besides just cocoa and coffee, as I said, they've got mangoes, bananas, papayas, starfruit, and fruits we don't even see up here because they're local
there.
there.
Lots of fruits in the tropical area we never know.
Right.
They're delicious.
Yes, yeah, we were fortunate. We actually did a local fruit tasting, and I think of the 20 fruits we got to try, I had only heard of 4 before, so it was crazy. But the more shocking things were that you see what happens when there's crops that are less native to the area that are promoted because of certain incentives, in
Greed.
yeah, yes, and what it can do to the area. So palm oil is one of those, and palm oil is something that can be in lots of different products. People who are used to reading labels might see that it's in things like peanut butter and a bunch of other products, and you might have heard that it's something that you should avoid if possible, but not everyone always understands why. We were able to see firsthand why palm oil is something that we don't want to encourage or support. In an area of Colombia, we met a farmer who had been there for generations. His father before him grew cocoa. He was going to pass it down to his nephews. And directly across the street from him was an area that had been farmed for cacao, but the farmer had sold to palm oil production. And in order to plant the crops for palm oil, they essentially had to completely obliterate everything in terms of the local plant life and vegetation that was there and just plant the trees for palm oil. Palm oil is a monocrop in that sense, so that nothing else can grow with it or amongst it. It was literally one side of the street to the next. One looked very natural. The cacao had, like I said, was growing with starfruit and bananas and other plants, shrubs and other things. Directly across this wooded
was a desert.
Dirt road, it was a desert and just one type of tree. And it was shocking.
Idea.
Yeah, it was really, really shocking to see. So these are the sorts of stories that you only get from getting to see that and understand the impact it has.
I bet nobody knows about that. We should ban palm oil.
There's people working towards that. Yeah, because once you obliterate a local vegetation area, it's very hard to get it back.
Probably never.
Yeah.
Look what happened in Ireland with the monocrop.
Yes.
Ridiculous. Well, greed.
But on the other end, there are also wonderful stories that I was able to return with. And amongst those was actually the very first full day of our trip was we were invited to a very special area of Colombia in the Sierra Nevada region. So it's near the mountainous side of the country. And we were actually invited to visit with a local indigenous tribe that has farmed cacao for hundreds and hundreds of years. And the reason why you have to be invited is because this is a tribe that actually lives, set out from most of the rest of the civilized area, and they have lived the same way for a very long time. And so when
we don't want anybody bugging them.
Right, yeah, I mean, you can understand.
They want to stay the way we were.
Right.
They're happy the way they are.
Right.
Keep your paws off us.
Yes. So we had to kind of hike through the woods to get to them, first of all. can't take a car and just get dropped off or anything like that. And they're called the Arhuacos. And it's, as I said, it's an indigenous tribe in Colombia. There's only so many of them left because they had been pushed, by government at one period of time to kind of
They
the
want
brink.
the land free.
Yeah, lots of issues
That's
with
all
that.
over.
It sounds familiar, right? It's kind of the
it's
same
all
story that's been told in many countries over
That is sad.
years.
Well, we did it too.
Yes, right. And so, but luckily they've been given their land back and they are now farming cacao again. And what was wonderful was when we were invited to meet with, they have a spiritual leader who's called a mamo. And this is all things that I learned on the trip. I did not have this knowledge beforehand. So firsthand.
Very few people have it. You're lucky.
Yes,
And
yeah.
we're lucky to hear it.
Yes, well, the mamo actually asked us to bring back their story. And what he shared with us after we had a very intense process, there were about 14 of us total on the trip who all had to introduce ourselves one at a time to their spiritual leader and tell him where we were from and what we were doing there and how we worked in chocolate. And so besides myself and Denise Castronovo, there were other people that worked in different aspects of chocolate. We had some people that are also chocolate educators like myself. We had other chocolate makers from not just the US, but Canada and France and other areas. We had people that invest in cacao, people that do spiritual cacao ceremonies, so all these different aspects. And so we all shared what we do, and the mamo listened, sitting under his tree, smoking his pipe and, looking very intent. And once he had learned about us, and each of our stories had to be, it took a while because we had to say it in English. They had to translate it into Spanish, and then the Spanish got translated into the native language. So it just took a long time, but it was very worth it because at the end, the mamo said to us that, they are a very environmentally aware tribe. The Mother Earth has always been something that they took great care in, and they call themselves Big Brother because anyone who is not part of the Arhuaco community would be little brother. So we are little brother, you and I. And so they look out for us. And they said to us that they've noticed that Mother Earth has not been so happy the past several years. And
Sad.
and they've noticed this. And when that happens, they've tried to do different things to kind of appease Mother Earth, and they haven't been able to. And so he turned to us and said, we need your help. It's little brother. Normally, they feel the responsibility of being big brother, but they said, we need your help because we know it is man that is doing these things. He said, we have observed the birds for hundreds of years and they always do the same thing. We observed the tide for hundreds of years and it always does the same thing. The wolf always does the same thing. It is only man that changes. And so he said, bring our story back to where you come from, to your people.
It's a great idea.
And
he was a wise man.
He was very wise. And this is a really intense thing to hear about from someone that, lives in a village in the woods, but to have such a connection to the planet, it was an amazing, amazing thing. So I actually have some chocolate. Well, I have some pictures, but I also have some chocolate that was made with beans that were farmed by the Arhuacos.
Oh, really?
So I'd like you to try some, if you'd like.
Wonderful.
Of course you would, right? Yeah. So this is a 72% dark chocolate that is made with beans that are farmed by the Arhuacos. And
Can I eat it?
you absolutely may eat it. And I'm just going to talk as you eat it. And it's made by Cacao Hunters, which is a company local to Colombia that makes chocolate that was also participating in our trip. What do you think?
This is good for Valentine's Day.
It's
It's very good.
Isn't it? It has some fruity flavors in it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. As we said, there's so much fruit.
So
that
how
grows.
can we help them?
Well, certainly doing what you can when it comes to taking care of the environment. You know, whatever small ways as an individual are, you know, if every individual takes a little bit more care in what they do, it amounts to a bigger thing. But also, you know, paying attention to the products you buy, who you support, and
Oh, this is great.
it's
I
really good.
really like it.
Isn't it delicious? Yeah. And this is the other thing too. When we eat chocolate that's made by people that have these stories, and we take the time to learn the stories, you are literally now connected in a very, very kind of intimate way, you know, to people in a different place that you may never get to meet or see, but you are having the fruits of their labor.
Terrific, I like it.
And by understanding and appreciating what they did to give you something that makes you happy and nourishes you, I think is a special
makes me
thing.
happy.
It sure does, yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah, so, and I'll show you a picture of the Arhuacos. As I said, this was at the beginning of our trip, and they're just an amazing group of people. Here's one of
I'm
the.
afraid they won't be around much longer. It's a very sad story.
Here's one of the girls who actually helped
Oh, very
lead us
handsome looking.
into the woods, because we had to hike quite a ways to get to their village, and they all wear white. How they keep their clothes so white, I don't know how they do that, but it was really amazing to see. And we one more chocolate
Yes.
to try.
I think now I'm afraid we've come almost to the end of this, which makes me sad because this is a fascinating story. I think we have to redo and come back and do more about it. But you will see the pictures, which are really interesting, and you will understand that chocolate is a fantastic thing. First of all, it tastes so fabulous, and it makes everybody happy. So thank you, Victoria, for coming on. We shall have to redo more about it. We want to hear all about this, because there's never enough story on this.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Love to have you. And love the chocolate. That one from the tribe is